The night Rachel Carson opened her door to a shivering stranger would become the dividing line in her life, everything before and everything after. It was nearly midnight in the small coastal town of Millfield, Massachusetts, when the desperate knocking pulled Rachel from her worn couch, where she'd been dozing after a 14-hour shift at the diner. Through the peephole, she saw a woman huddled against the February wind. Her thin jacket pulled tight around her shoulders, dark hair whipping wildly around a pale face. "Please," the woman's teeth chattered as Rachel cracked open the door. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my car broke down 2 miles back and my phone's dead. It's freezing out here." Rachel hesitated. At 32, she'd learned caution the hard way. Millfield had changed since her childhood. The fishing industry had collapsed. The opioid crisis had taken hold, and many of the quaint shops that once lined Harbor Street had been boarded up. But something in the woman's eyes, a resigned dignity despite her obvious desperation, made Rachel step aside. "Come in," she said. "You can warm up while you call for help." The stranger stumbled into the small living room, bringing with her the scent of the sea and winter air. Up close, Rachel noticed how thin she was beneath the inadequate jacket. Her hands were red and chapped, her boots scuffed and worn at the heels. But there was something else, a grace in her movements, a careful way of speaking that suggested education, refinement. "I'm Victoria," the woman said, extending a trembling hand. "Victoria Winters. Thank you for your kindness." Most houses were dark, and the ones with lights, well, no one answered. "Rachel Carson," Rachel replied, taking the cold hand briefly. "Let me get you some tea. The phone's there if you want to call someone." In the kitchen, Rachel filled her kettle and gathered 2 mugs, keeping one eye on the stranger. Victoria stood in the center of the living room, looking at the faded photos on the wall, Rachel's parents in front of the diner they'd once owned, Rachel in a high school graduation gown, the small fishing boat her father had captained before the accident. "You've lived here your whole life?" Victoria asked, her voice steadier now. Rachel nodded, returning with 2 steaming mugs. "Born and raised. My parents left me the house when they passed. It's not much, but it's mine." She didn't mention the second mortgage she'd taken out to pay for her mother's medical bills, or the constant worry about making ends meet. "Did you call for help?" Victoria's expression faltered. "There's no one to call. I was passing through. My car's probably not worth fixing anyway." She sipped the tea, her hands still shaking slightly. "I can try to find a hotel if there's one open." "Not at this hour," Rachel said. "The nearest hotel is in Westbrook, 15 miles away. You can take the couch for tonight." It was impulsive, perhaps foolish, but Rachel had always been her father's daughter. He'd never turned away anyone in need. The fishing community had operated on mutual support. You helped others, because someday you might need help yourself. Victoria looked like she might protest, but then nodded gratefully. "Just for tonight. I'll be gone first thing in the morning." Rachel fetched a blanket and pillow from the hall closet. As she handed them over, she noticed a faint bruise near Victoria's wrist, partially hidden by her sleeve. Their eyes met briefly, and Victoria quickly pulled her sleeve down. "Bathroom's down the hall if you need it," Rachel said, pretending she hadn't seen. Whatever Victoria was running from, it wasn't Rachel's business to pry. "I have to be up at 5 for my shift at Harborside Diner if you need a ride somewhere." "Thank you," Victoria said quietly, "for everything." Sleep came fitfully to Rachel that night. She found herself listening for movement, wondering about her unexpected guest. Victoria hadn't volunteered much information, and Rachel hadn't asked. Everyone had their burdens, their secrets. Rachel certainly had hers. At 4:30 a.m., Rachel's alarm jangled. She dressed quickly in the dark, pulling on her waitress uniform, black pants and a blue polo with Harborside Diner embroidered over the pocket. When she entered the living room, she was surprised to find Victoria already awake, the blanket neatly folded. "You're up early," Rachel commented. Victoria nodded. "I don't sleep much these days." In the pale light of dawn, she looked even more worn than she had the night before. Shadows under her eyes pronounced against her fair skin. "I appreciate the couch. It was the best sleep I've had in weeks." Something in that statement made Rachel's heart twist. "Look," she said impulsively, "I'll be gone all day. You can stay here if you need to figure things out. There's food in the fridge." Victoria's eyes widened. "I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition," Rachel insisted, grabbing her coat. Just lock up if you go out. I'll be back around 7. Before Victoria could protest further, Rachel was out the door, the cold morning air filling her lungs. As she walked the 6 blocks to the diner, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. Victoria seemed harmless, but Rachel barely knew her. Still, there wasn't much to steal in the small house, and Rachel had the sense that Victoria needed kindness more than anything else. The diner was already bustling when Rachel arrived. Mike, the cook, was firing up the grill, and Doris, the other waitress, was setting out silverware. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. "You look like you barely slept," Doris commented as Rachel tied on her apron. "Had an unexpected visitor?" Rachel replied vaguely. "No big deal." The morning rush kept her too busy for further conversation. Fishermen coming in after early catches, commuters grabbing coffee before the drive to Portland, the regular crowd of retirees who occupied the corner booth every morning. Rachel moved efficiently between tables, taking orders, delivering plates, refilling coffee cups, a dance she'd perfected over the years. It was just after the lunch rush when the bell above the door chimed and a man entered who immediately seemed out of place in the modest diner. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a tailored charcoal overcoat that looked like it cost more than Rachel made in 2 months. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his jawline sharp, his eyes a startling blue, scanning the diner with intensity. "Table for 1?" Rachel asked, grabbing a menu. "Actually," the man said, his voice deep and measured, "I was hoping for some information." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. "I'm looking for this woman. Her name is Victoria Winters. I have reason to believe she might have passed through here." Rachel's heart skipped. The photograph showed Victoria looking healthier, her hair styled elegantly, wearing a black cocktail dress at what appeared to be a charity event. The man in the photo was asking about was unmistakably her house guest. "I haven't seen her," Rachel lied smoothly, years of dealing with difficult customers making her expression unreadable. "What's your interest?" A flicker of something, disappointment, suspicion, crossed the man's face. "My name is Jackson Reed. Victoria is important to me. She disappeared 3 days ago, and I've been trying to find her." Rachel recognized the name immediately. Jackson Reed was the founder of Reed Innovations, a tech company that had made headlines for revolutionary advances in renewable energy. His face occasionally appeared on business magazines that customers left behind at the diner. What would a billionaire tech mogul want with Victoria? "If she comes in, who should I say is looking for her?" Rachel asked, maintaining her composure. "Just tell her Jack is worried about her," he said, slipping a business card across the counter. "Please call me if you see her. It's urgent." After he left, Rachel stared at the business card in her hand. The embossed letters confirmed what she already knew. Jackson Reed, CEO, Reed Innovations. She tucked it into her apron pocket, a strange unease settling over her. Victoria was clearly running from something or someone, even if that someone was one of the richest men in America. The rest of her shift dragged. Rachel found herself watching the door, half expecting Jackson Reed to return. By closing time, her nerves were frayed. She declined Mike's offer of a ride and walked home quickly, wondering if Victoria would still be there and what secrets she might be hiding. Rachel paused at her own front door, key in hand, uncertain what she might find inside. The living room lights glowed softly through the curtains. Taking a deep breath, she unlocked the door and stepped in to find Victoria seated at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. The house smelled of garlic and herbs. "I hope you don't mind," Victoria said, gesturing to a pot on the stove. "I made pasta sauce. It seemed like the least I could do." Rachel set her bag down, noticing the kitchen was cleaner than she'd left it. The counters gleamed. Dishes were washed and stacked neatly in the drying rack. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to." Victoria smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her tired face. "Cooking helps me think, and you've been so kind." Rachel hung up her coat, deliberating how to broach the subject of Jackson Reed's visit. "Someone came looking for you today," she said finally, watching Victoria carefully. The transformation was immediate. Victoria's shoulders tensed, her knuckles whitening around the mug. "Who?" she whispered. "He said his name was Jackson Reed." Rachel pulled the business card from her pocket and placed it on the table. He seemed concerned. Victoria stared at the card as if it might bite her. "What did you tell him?" "That I hadn't seen you." Rachel sat down across from her guest. I don't make a habit of giving information about strangers to other strangers, no matter how expensive their coats are. Relief softened Victoria's features. Thank you. She hesitated, then pushed up her sleeve, revealing what Rachel had glimpsed the night before. Not just one bruise, but a series of them, fingerprints marked in purple and yellow across her wrist. Did he do that to you? Rachel asked, her voice tightening. No, Victoria said quickly. No, Jack would never. These are from someone else. She pulled her sleeve back down. It's complicated. I've got time, Rachel said, getting up to serve 2 bowls of the pasta. The sauce smelled incredible, rich with tomatoes and herbs she couldn't identify. And it seems like you owe me an explanation if I'm lying to billionaires on your behalf. Victoria accepted the bowl with a nod of thanks. Jack and I grew up together in a small town in Vermont. Our families were close. When my parents died in a car accident when I was 16, Jack's family took me in. She twirled pasta around her fork, but didn't eat. Jack was already brilliant, already creating things that would eventually make him famous. We lost touch when he went to MIT, and I stayed to study art at a state college. So how did you end up with bruises, a broken-down car, and no place to sleep? Rachel asked between bites of the best pasta she'd ever tasted. Victoria's expression darkened. 3 years ago, Jack reached out. His company was taking off, and he needed someone to manage his charitable foundation. Since I had experience working for non-profits, he offered me the position. She finally took a small bite of food. We reconnected. It was wonderful, working together. He trusted me. Rachel waited while Victoria gathered herself, sensing the difficult part of the story approaching. 6 months ago, Jack started seeing Caroline Blackwood. Her father is Warren Blackwood, one of Jack's biggest investors. Victoria's voice turned bitter. She's exactly what you'd expect. Beautiful, connected, perfect on paper for someone in Jack's position. And you were in love with him, Rachel guessed quietly. Victoria's eyes snapped up, surprise evident in her expression before she nodded slowly. I never told him. It wouldn't have been appropriate. But Caroline, she knew somehow. She started making my life difficult. Small things at first. Excluding me from meetings, changing schedules without telling me, undermining me with the board. Rachel thought of the man she'd met that day, his intense gaze, the authority he carried. And Jackson didn't notice. Jack's been consumed with a major new project. He's developing technology that could revolutionize water purification in developing countries. Victoria's voice carried undisguised admiration. He's brilliant, but sometimes oblivious to office politics. And Caroline is very careful around him. The bruises, Rachel prompted gently. Victoria pushed her bowl away, appetite gone. 3 days ago, I discovered discrepancies in the foundation accounts. Large sums of money being diverted to offshore accounts. When I dug deeper, I found Caroline's signature on the transfers, alongside forged copies of mine. Her voice trembled. I confronted her privately, thinking there must be some explanation. She didn't take it well. Rachel thought of her own small-town struggles, the mortgage payments, the long shifts for minimal tips, the lingering grief over her parents. Yet Victoria's problems seemed to occupy another world entirely. Corporate intrigue, embezzlement, a love triangle with one of America's wealthiest men. She grabbed me, Victoria continued, said if I breathed a word to Jack, she would tell him I was the one stealing from the foundation, that she had evidence against me. She made it clear no one would believe me over her. A bitter laugh escaped her. The bruises were just to emphasize her point. So you ran, Rachel stated. It wasn't a question. Victoria nodded. I panicked, packed a bag, took some cash, and left Boston that night. I was heading north, no real destination in mind. Then my car broke down outside your town, and here we are. She sighed heavily. Now Jack's looking for me, and I don't know what to do. If I tell him about Caroline, she'll turn everything against me. If I don't, she'll keep stealing from children who need that money. Rachel considered this as she cleared their bowls. Victoria followed, insisting on helping with the washing up. They worked in silence for a few moments, the domestic routine at odds with the dramatic revelations. You must think I'm pathetic, Victoria said finally, running away instead of standing up for myself. Actually, Rachel replied, handing her a plate to dry, I think you're braver than you realize. You were protecting the foundation by not letting her frame you, but now you need evidence against her. Victoria shook her head. Any evidence would be on the Foundation's servers. I can't access those remotely. Rachel dried her hands, thinking, this Jack, he came looking for you himself. Not security, not private investigators. Him personally, in a small diner in a town most people can't find on a map. That says something, doesn't it? It says he's worried about the Foundation, Victoria insisted. No, Rachel countered, surprising herself with her certainty. A man like that has people to worry about the Foundation for him. He came himself because he's worried about you. Victoria's eyes filled with uncertainty. You don't know him like I do. Jack's always been driven, focused on his goals. He's kind, but what? He cares enough to come looking for you in person, doesn't he? Rachel persisted. Maybe you should talk to him. Tell him what you found. And risk Caroline's accusations? Victoria shook her head. I can't. Then get proof first, Rachel suggested. You said the evidence is on the Foundation's servers. Could you access them somehow? Victoria hesitated. Maybe. The Foundation's main office is in Boston, about 2 hours from here. I have access badges, passwords, but Caroline might have already blocked them. Only one way to find out, Rachel said firmly. I have tomorrow off. We could drive to Boston. The offer surprised her even as she made it. Getting involved in corporate espionage and potential legal trouble wasn't exactly on her agenda, but something about Victoria's story and the genuine concern in Jackson Reed's eyes earlier that day compelled her. Victoria stared at her in disbelief. Why would you help me? You barely know me. Rachel thought about her parents, about the values they'd instilled in her before the cancer took them both within months of each other, about the community that had rallied around her family during those dark days, because sometimes people need help, and sometimes I'm the person who can give it. That's reason enough. A tentative hope flickered in Victoria's eyes. If we could get evidence of the transfers, proof that Caroline forged my signature, then Jackson would believe you, Rachel finished, and this Caroline would face consequences. Victoria's expression hardened with new resolve. We'd need to be careful. In and out quickly. And if we're caught, we won't be, Rachel assured her with more confidence than she felt. We'll leave early before dawn. Your badges still might work, and if they do, we get the evidence and get out. That night, as Rachel lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she wondered what she was getting herself into. Her life had been predictable, if difficult, before Victoria appeared on her doorstep. Now she was planning to drive to Boston to sneak into a corporate office and gather evidence against the girlfriend of one of America's most powerful men. The sensible thing would be to tell Victoria to handle her problems alone. But Rachel had never been particularly sensible when it came to helping others. It was both her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. Dawn had barely broken when Rachel and Victoria pulled out of Millfield in Rachel's aging Honda Civic. The heater sputtered weakly against the February chill as they headed south toward Boston. Victoria sat rigid in the passenger seat, her fingers nervously tapping against a small notebook where she'd written down the locations of the files they needed. Run me through the plan again, Rachel said, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Victoria exhaled slowly. The Foundation office is in the same building as Reed Innovations, but on a different floor. Weekends are quiet, just security at the main desk. My access badge should still work. We go to my office, access the financial records, download the evidence of Caroline's transfers and the forged signatures, and leave. And if your badge doesn't work? A shadow crossed Victoria's face. Then we leave immediately. I won't risk getting you in trouble. The miles passed in tense silence. Rachel found herself repeatedly checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following them. She'd left a note for Doris explaining a family emergency had taken her out of town. Not entirely a lie, if she considered that Victoria had become something like family in the brief time they'd known each other. Boston's skyline appeared on the horizon, glass towers reaching toward the cloudy sky. Victoria directed Rachel through the city until they reached a sleek glass building with Reed Innovations emblazoned across the top. Park in the public garage 2 blocks over, Victoria instructed. Less chance of the car being noticed. They walked briskly to the building, Victoria's steps becoming less certain as they approached. At the entrance, she hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the door. "We can still turn back," Rachel offered quietly. Victoria squared her shoulders. "No, I need to do this." Inside, the weekend security guard barely glanced up as Victoria swiped her badge. A green light flashed, and relief washed over her face as they were allowed through. They rode the elevator to the 14th floor in silence, the only sound the gentle hum of the machinery. The Reed Foundation offices were deserted, lights automatically brightening as they entered. Victoria moved with purpose now, leading Rachel through an open workspace to a corner office with a glass door. The nameplate read, "Victoria Winters, Executive Director." "They haven't even removed my name," Victoria murmured, swiping her badge again to enter. Once inside, Victoria went straight to the computer, booting it up while Rachel stood watch at the door. The computer asked for a password, which Victoria entered without hesitation. Relief crossed her face when it was accepted. "I'm in," she whispered. "Caroline must not have thought I'd come back." Rachel watched as Victoria navigated through files with practiced efficiency, occasionally muttering to herself. After several tense minutes, Victoria inserted a small flash drive into the computer. "Found them," she said. "Wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg and Switzerland. All with my electronic signature, but I never authorized these." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. "And here, emails I supposedly sent approving the transfers. I never wrote these." Rachel peered over her shoulder at the screen, the amounts making her breath catch. Hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted from charitable projects to hidden accounts. "Can you prove they're forgeries?" Victoria nodded grimly. "The metadata shows these emails were created and sent from Caroline's computer, not mine. And look at this." She pointed to a series of transactions. "These were made when I was presenting at a conference in Chicago. There are dozens of witnesses who saw me there." As Victoria continued downloading evidence, Rachel wandered to the window. From this height, Boston stretched out before her, the morning sun now fully risen, gleaming off buildings and the harbor beyond. It was a world away from her small coastal town, a reminder of how far she'd come from her normal life in just 24 hours. A movement in the reflection caught her attention, a figure passing by the main office entrance. Rachel spun around. "Someone's coming." Victoria's head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. She quickly ejected the flash drive and shut down the computer. "We need to go, now." They slipped out the back door of Victoria's office, just as the main office door opened. Through the glass wall, Rachel caught a glimpse of a tall, blonde woman in an expensive-looking coat, accompanied by a man in a security uniform. Caroline Blackwood. Victoria froze, her face draining of color. Rachel pulled her behind a filing cabinet as Caroline's voice drifted through the office. "I just need to retrieve some documents from Victoria's office. It won't take long." Victoria's grip on Rachel's arm tightened painfully. They were trapped, with Caroline standing between them and the only exit. The security guard remained by the main door while Caroline moved toward Victoria's office. "There's a service stairwell," Victoria whispered, barely audible. This way, they crept along the wall, staying low, making their way toward a narrow door at the far end of the office. Rachel's heart hammered so loudly, she was certain it would give them away. Just as they reached the stairwell door, a sharp voice rang out, "Stop right there!" Rachel turned to see Caroline standing in the doorway of Victoria's office, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. The security guard was already moving toward them. "Run!" Rachel hissed, pushing the stairwell door open. They raced down the stairs, footsteps echoing in the confined space, the shouts of the security guard following them. 3 floors down, Victoria stumbled, nearly falling headlong down the remaining steps. Rachel caught her arm, steadying her. "Keep going," Victoria gasped. "Almost there." They burst out of the stairwell into a service corridor, then through another door that led to the building's main lobby. Walking as calmly as they could manage, they crossed to the front doors and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. "Don't run," Victoria cautioned as they moved swiftly away from the building. "It draws attention." They'd made it 2 blocks before the wail of a police siren sliced through the air. Rachel glanced back to see a police car pulling up in front of the Reed building. "Caroline called the police," she said grimly. "We need to get off the street." Victoria nodded, clutching the flash drive in her pocket. This way, she led them through a series of side streets until they reached a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. Inside, the warmth and scent of coffee enveloped them. Victoria chose a table at the back, positioned to view the entrance. "We should be safe here for a bit," she said, her voice still trembling. "I doubt Caroline would think to look for us in a place like this." Rachel ordered 2 coffees using the last of her cash. When she returned to the table, Victoria was staring at the flash drive in her hand. "We got what we came for," Rachel said. "Now what?" Victoria's expression was troubled. "I need to get this to Jack, but Caroline will have told him her version by now, that I broke into the office, that I'm the one stealing from the foundation." "Then we need to find him first," Rachel insisted, "before she can turn him completely against you." Victoria shook her head. "It's not that simple. Jack will be at the penthouse in Back Bay, heavily secured, especially on weekends. We can't just walk in." A new voice interrupted them. "No, you can't." They both looked up, startled. Standing beside their table was Jackson Reed himself, his expression unreadable. Behind him stood a man who was clearly security, broad-shouldered and watchful. Rachel instinctively moved to shield Victoria, but Jackson raised a hand in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice lower than Rachel remembered from the diner. "I just want to talk." He glanced at his security guard. "Wait outside, Mark." After the guard reluctantly departed, Jackson slid into the empty chair at their table. Up close, he looked tired, with shadows under his piercing blue eyes and tension in the set of his jaw. "How did you find us?" Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your badge activity triggered an alert," Jackson replied, "and I've had people watching the train stations and bus terminals since you disappeared." His gaze shifted to Rachel. "When I saw the security footage of you both leaving the building, I recognized you from the diner. It wasn't hard to guess you'd try to find somewhere nearby to regroup." Victoria's hand closed around the flash drive. "Jack, I can explain." "You don't need to," he said, surprising both women. "I know about Caroline's embezzlement." The statement hung in the air between them. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "You know," she finally managed. Jackson nodded grimly. "I discovered it 3 days ago, the same day you disappeared. I've been trying to find you ever since, not just because of the foundation, but because I was worried Caroline had done something to you." His eyes darkened. "When I confronted her, she claimed you were behind it all, that you'd threatened her, and then run. But the evidence didn't add up." "Then why is she still working for you?" Rachel demanded. "Why are the police after us and not her?" "They're not after you," Jackson said, "and Caroline isn't working for me anymore. What you saw at the office was her collecting her things under supervision. The police were called because security didn't recognize you, Rachel, and thought you might be helping Victoria steal more files." He turned back to Victoria, his expression softening. "Why did you run, Vic? Why didn't you come to me?" The nickname seemed to break something in Victoria. Tears welled in her eyes as she pushed up her sleeve, revealing the bruises that had begun to fade but were still clearly visible. "She said you'd never believe me," Victoria whispered, "that she had evidence against me, that your investors would side with her father." Jackson's face darkened as he gently took her wrist, examining the bruises. "She did this to you?" Victoria nodded, unable to speak. "I've already filed charges against Caroline for the embezzlement," Jackson said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "But this changes things." The cafe grew busier as the morning progressed, the hum of conversation providing a shield of privacy for the intense discussion at the corner table. Victoria had handed the flash drive to Jackson, who examined its contents on his tablet, his expression growing grimmer with each new piece of evidence. "This confirms everything I suspected," he said finally, setting the tablet down. "Caroline was siphoning funds from our water purification initiative in East Africa, over $2 million diverted in total." Rachel, who had remained largely silent during their exchange, felt out of place in this high-stakes drama. The amount Jackson mentioned so casually represented more money than she would see in her lifetime of waitressing. "What happens now?" she asked. Jackson's gaze shifted to her, studying her with newfound interest. "Now, I want to know more about the person who helped Victoria when no one else would." His tone softened. "She told me you took her in without question, lied to protect her, and drove her to Boston to help gather evidence. Why would you take such risks for a stranger?" Rachel felt herself flush under his scrutiny. "It wasn't a calculated decision. She needed help. I gave it." She shrugged, uncomfortable with his attention. "People have helped me before when I needed it." A small smile touched Jackson's lips. "Simple as that?" "Not everyone has ulterior motives," Rachel replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Something in her directness seemed to catch him off guard. He nodded slowly, then turned back to Victoria. We need to make this official. I've already frozen Caroline's access to all read accounts, but we need to file a police report about the assault. He gestured to her wrist. Combined with the embezzlement charges, she won't be able to hurt anyone else. Victoria hesitated. What about Warren Blackwood? He's one of your biggest investors. He won't take kindly to his daughter being charged. Let me worry about Blackwood, Jackson said firmly. The board already knows about the embezzlement. They stand behind me and you. He reached across the table to take Victoria's hand. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I've been so focused on the new project that I missed what was right in front of me. The tenderness in his voice made Rachel feel like an intruder. She shifted uncomfortably, wondering if she should excuse herself. You couldn't have known, Victoria said softly. I should have trusted you enough to tell you. This isn't on either of you, Rachel interjected, unable to help herself. Caroline manipulated both of you. She's the only one responsible for her actions. Both turned to her, surprised by her vehemence. Jackson's expression shifted to one of thoughtful assessment. Rachel's right, he agreed, but I still wish you'd felt safe enough to come to me. He squeezed Victoria's hand before releasing it. We should go to the police station. My lawyers are already waiting there. Victoria nodded, then glanced at Rachel. Will you come with us? I know I've already asked too much, but... Of course, Rachel replied without hesitation. I'm already in this deep. The next few hours passed in a blur of sterile waiting rooms, formal statements and detailed explanations. Rachel watched as Victoria transformed before her eyes. The frightened woman who had appeared on her doorstep now spoke with calm authority, presenting evidence and answering questions with precision. Jackson remained by her side throughout, his presence both protective and respectful. By late afternoon, they'd completed the formal charges against Caroline Blackwood: embezzlement, assault, and creating fraudulent documents. The detective handling the case assured them that with the evidence provided, including Victoria's bruises and the financial records, Caroline would likely face significant jail time. As they emerged from the police station, exhaustion finally catching up with them, Jackson turned to both women. You must be hungry. Let me take you to dinner. They ended up in a small Italian restaurant tucked away on a side street. Not the upscale establishment Rachel had expected a billionaire to choose, but a warm, family-owned place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. The owner greeted Jackson by name, leading them to a secluded corner table. I've been coming here since my college days, Jackson explained, noting Rachel's surprise. Best gnocchi in Boston, and they've never treated me differently, even after... He gestured vaguely, encompassing his success. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, the conversation gradually shifted from Caroline's crimes to more personal matters. Rachel learned that Jackson had grown up in a middle-class household, his father a high school science teacher, his mother a nurse. His tech empire had begun in his college dorm room, with an idea for more efficient solar panels. The money was never the goal, he said, twirling pasta around his fork. I wanted to create solutions to real problems: clean energy, water purification. These things can change lives. Rachel found herself warming to him despite her initial skepticism of wealthy entrepreneurs. There was a genuine passion in the way he spoke about his work, a sincerity that couldn't be faked. What about you, Rachel? He asked, turning those intense blue eyes on her. Victoria mentioned you've lived in Millfield your whole life. Rachel nodded, suddenly self-conscious about her small-town existence. My parents owned the diner where I work. After they passed, I couldn't bring myself to sell it, even though the new owner keeps threatening to close it down. She sipped her wine, wondering why she was sharing this with him. It's struggling, like most businesses in Millfield. The fishing industry collapsed and nothing replaced it. What would save it? Jackson asked, leaning forward slightly. The question caught Rachel off guard. Save the diner? Save Millfield, he clarified. Rachel considered this. No one had ever asked her opinion on saving her dying hometown. Honestly? Investment. The harbor needs renovation. The old cannery sits empty. It could be repurposed for something sustainable. The people are hard-working, but there's no opportunity anymore. Victoria, who had been quietly listening, exchanged a glance with Jackson. Something unspoken passed between them. What? Rachel asked, catching the look. Nothing, Jackson replied, but a slight smile played at his lips. Just thinking. After dinner, Jackson insisted on driving them back to Millfield himself. Victoria sat in the front of his luxury SUV while Rachel stared out the window from the back seat, watching Boston's lights recede behind them. The events of the past 2 days felt increasingly surreal as they headed back to her small coastal town. They reached Millfield just after nightfall, the streets quiet and largely deserted. Jackson pulled up in front of Rachel's small house, the modest structure looking even more humble next to his vehicle. "Thank you," he said, turning to face her as she gathered her things. "For everything you did for Victoria. Not many people would have helped a stranger the way you did." Rachel shrugged, uncomfortable with his gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Victoria said firmly. "They wouldn't have. I knocked on 6 doors before yours." They said their goodbyes, Victoria embracing Rachel tightly and promising to stay in touch. As they drove away, Rachel felt an unexpected emptiness. She had done the right thing, helped Victoria find justice, but now she was returning to her same struggling life, the mortgage payments, the diner shifts, the quiet house. Monday morning arrived with the steady rain that matched Rachel's mood. She walked to work with her collar turned up against the drizzle, mentally preparing herself for another long shift. The diner was unusually busy when she arrived. Mike was frantically working the grill and Doris looked harried as she balanced plates on both arms. "Thank God you're here," Doris said when she spotted Rachel. "We're swamped. There's a whole group of suits in the back booth, something about a business meeting." Rachel tied on her apron and grabbed her notepad, making her way toward the back of the diner. She stopped short when she recognized the man at the center of the group, Jackson Reed, dressed in a casual sweater rather than his tailored suit, but unmistakable nonetheless. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Rachel, just the person we wanted to see." Confused, Rachel glanced at the others at the table, men and women in business attire with tablets and laptops open before them. "What's going on?" "I'd like you to meet my development team," Jackson said. "We're here to discuss the potential renovation of Millfield Harbor and the repurposing of the old cannery site as a Reed Innovations research facility focusing on sustainable fishing technologies." Rachel stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "You're... what?" Jackson's smile widened. "After our conversation last night, I made some calls. Millfield's location is perfect for what we need, and the available workforce with fishing experience would be invaluable for our research." "But..." Rachel struggled to process what she was hearing. "This is because of what I said at dinner?" "Partly," he admitted, "but also because I owe you. Without you, Victoria might never have returned, and Caroline would have continued stealing from children who desperately need that clean water." He gestured to an empty chair beside him. "Join us? We could use a local perspective, and I have a feeling you have insights worth hearing." As Rachel sat down, still dazed, the bell above the diner door chimed. Victoria entered, shaking raindrops from her coat. She smiled when she saw Rachel coming over to join them. "I told Jack he was moving too quickly," she said, sliding into the seat beside Rachel. "But once he gets an idea in his head, there's no stopping him." "The Reed Foundation is also interested in establishing a community center here," Jackson continued. "Victoria will be overseeing that project. She speaks very highly of you and thinks you might be interested in helping to run it." Rachel looked between them, tears unexpectedly stinging her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Jackson's expression softened. "Because you showed me something I'd forgotten. That sometimes the simplest acts of kindness can change everything." He glanced at Victoria, something warm in his gaze. "And because Millfield gave me back someone very important to me." Outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight was breaking through the clouds. Through the diner window, Rachel could see the harbor, imagining it transformed, revitalized, full of purpose again. Her small town given a second chance. And perhaps as Victoria smiled at her with genuine friendship, and Jackson looked at her with newfound respect, Rachel realized she was being given a second chance too. The future suddenly stretched before her, filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine, all because she had opened her door to a freezing woman on a winter night.